Robert Frost cultivated his image as a kind of homespun New England everyman, and there was perhaps a little truth to that, but he was, in fact, a rather dark figure, a little bit more disturbing than the superficial appreciation of his work sometimes allows. His themes could often creep up as being very disturbing, but one of the more interesting pieces that he published is a short poem called Acquainted with the Night, where he delves into an area that is unlike his usual milieu. It's set in an urban setting. It is explicitly quite dealing with depression and darkness in a very visceral way, and it's a curious addition to the Frost collected works. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye, and farther still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Which is moody, to say the least. You can make an awful lot out of the night imagery here. He is going and he's wandering through the night, and certainly the interpretation that jumps to mind is a wandering through depression, a wandering through a dark night of the soul, if you will. The imagery is all rather bleak. He has walked down in rain and back in rain. The weather is very much symbolic here, I would say, of a kind of harshness in reality and in the world around you, and feeling that everything is somewhat against you. I have outwalked the farthest city light. You have gone beyond the realm of humanity at that point. You have gone beyond the realm of civilization into a kind of blackness that is really only imaginary at that point. Significantly also, the furthest city light. Perhaps this is, I would say, an urban poem. He is wandering around in streets down the saddest city lane. He has passed by the watchman on his beat and dropping my eyes, unwilling to explain. Isolated from all humanity and far out beyond the reach of human connection, even in a clearly populous area. This isn't him, wandering around the hills of New England. This is him perhaps in London, perhaps in any large city where he feels somewhat alienated. I have stood and stopped the sound of feet, which is something you hear on a sidewalk. Again, a very harsh environment. When far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. Street again, very urban. And the luminary clock against the sky, a high clock. Perhaps if this isn't him in London, perhaps that's Big Ben. I'm not sure. But the impassivity of the clock, the alienation from time itself. The clock proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. Just a sense of indifference in time, a sense of this character, this poetic voice right here, is alienated, is isolated from any vestige of civilization that builds time, civilization of the watchman on the beat, some sort of a shared humanity there. There's a kind of desperateness in it, and yet there's nothing inherently, there's no ask for the desperation. It's just acknowledging that, yeah, I went and I felt this way. There's no sense of, this was particularly unusual. This is perhaps something that recurs with some regularity. Uh, in regularity, it is a very interesting formal poem. It's those quick tercets are, that's a terza rima, a third rhyme, the form coming from Dante, for God's sake. So this is a very difficult form to adopt, and he seems to be trying to wrestle his image of darkness into this very structured, time-bound form. This very rigid rhyme scheme: ABA, BCB, CDC, DAD, AA. The regularity of it is really quite striking. Now, using the iambic pentameter, it sounds very conversational. It sounds very normal speech-like that you associate with Frost, but this form is very difficult. This is that rhyme scheme is not easy in English, for God's sakes. It's not easy in any language, but in English, where we have some issues with, you don't have, it's not a naturally rhyming language. He's really tying his hands there and making himself sweat, but the ease and the fluidity within the poem of what he's saying is somewhat at odds with that difficult scheme that he set out for himself. And maybe that's part of the point. Maybe he's trying to give a sense of the struggle. Now, he doesn't seem to be sweating it. He doesn't seem to be particularly uncomfortable in this format. But there is something going on that is just ordinary about it. About, yeah, this is hard. This is at times quite excruciating. But I'm just going through it. I'm going about my business. This is what I do. And you can read that, obviously, as a metaphor for life itself, life and art. And he quite frequently blends those two. The whole image of him as the avuncular New England poet, or crusty New England poet, that is a kind of art in itself. And here he's showing a different side of himself. Here he's showing that, well, okay, it's not that simple. I'm not just the homespun guy. It's a weird little poem. In many ways, it's very conventional formally, but taken in context with the broader range of his work, this isn't the Snowy Woods. This isn't After Apple Picking. This is something very different, and its inclusion in his work fleshes out a really well-rounded picture of a modern artist, not somebody who's just trying to be the next John Greenleaf Whittier or something like that, but somebody who is very much of his time, very much working within the currents of the modernist movement, and who has a fullness of scope in his art that belies the easy assessment